lead in North Carolina, 50 to 49. But Vice President Kamala Harris, is leading by 1 in Arizona, 50 to 49, by 2 in Nevada and Georgia, 50 to 48 in each of those states.
The chubby little leprechaun pretending to be a journalist over at Fox News wants you to believe that Kamala Harris is beating Donald Trump. The latest Paul Ryan poll at Fox News has Harris up on Trump in the key swing states of Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona. Also noteworthy is the Fox survey on North Carolina, which has Donald Trump only up by 1 point in what seems to be a safe state, really. Coincidentally, the Cook Political Report has also made North Carolina a toss-up state. The last time Democrats won that in a presidential election was in 2008. Also, polling by Reuters Ipsos claims Harris has widened her lead over Trump. There have been wild swings in favor of Kamala Harris that seem inexplicable, really. Now, none of this makes sense on its face, especially after we see CNN's interview with her tonight. So is this just a sugar high? Some analysts think so, like Mark Halpern, whatever you think of him. Halpern believes that by the middle of September, Harris will be polling just as badly as Joe Biden was before he dropped out. But not if the polling has nothing to do with actual public support and everything to do with making it look like Kamala Harris could actually believably best Donald Trump in November. The idea that Joe Biden could beat Donald Trump just simply wasn't believable anymore, no matter how much they skewed the polls in his favor. So what we're looking at is a race that could be so close that election integrity could be the deciding factor. If Harris appears to be polling well by November, then that will just muddy the water further. Anyone calling out election irregularities will be accused of being a poor sport or worse, which we talked about in the last segment. That's very convenient. So far, Harris has no policy. She keeps dodging the press, and she has flipped on virtually every single issue. She is what you call a complete chameleon. So how is it possible that anyone can believe Harris would poll well against Donald Trump unless there's something off with the polls? Join us now to help make sense of what we're seeing is head pollster Rasmussen Reports, Mark Mitchell. Mark, thanks for joining us. You and I had an interesting conversation a little earlier today, and I hope we can share some of that with my audience. First off, I want to bring up that Fox poll. You see that they have Harris up on Trump in Arizona, Harris up on Trump in Georgia and Nevada, and then we'll get into North Carolina in a little bit. But I want to bring up your poll on swing states that mentioned Nevada and Arizona. You all have Trump up by 2 points in each of those states. You don't have recent polling on Georgia, so we didn't throw that one in there. Tell us what's going on with the Fox poll.
Well, a couple things. First, I would say the states all kind of seem to poll like each other now, and they're kind of the battleground states are kind of polling like Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are nationally. I'll tell you, we were 1.5 points to left in 2020. Fox News was one of the many mainstream pollsters that was from anywhere from 4 to 8 points to left. People have come out and said that they haven't corrected for those errors, and they think they're probably underestimating Trump's support. So when I see their swing state polls drop and they're 4 points to the left of mine, I think that checks. And I think my state polls are still way too tough on Donald Trump. I think there's a very real chance, because I didn't correct that much from 2020 either. And some of these states, Donald Trump overperformed like 6-7 points better than we had him in the polling back then. So I think there's a really real chance that in our most recent set of swing state polls, we had Donald Trump and Kamala Harris within a statistical tie in every single one of the 5 that we tested, everybody but Georgia. So there's a really good chance that he wins every single one of those. But I think the other important thing to point out is that our numbers were collected during the middle of the DNC. These Fox numbers were collected after the DNC. Even if Kamala Harris is slightly edging out Donald Trump nationally in Fox's numbers, and I have reasons to doubt them for sure, I definitely think they're still oversampling Democrats. And I'll tell you how. Like, you look at Arizona for Fox, and they have Republicans and Democrats tied in the party weightings there. Arizona leans Republican in party identification and turnout. So just there, but then even on top of that, when you wait there, when they have their poll weighted for parity in Democrats and Republicans, and there really isn't much of a crossover game, they have the independents going to Trump by upper single digits, but then Trump still losing the state. So that tells me they're getting really blue Republicans, which means they're probably not adjusting for things like the 2020 recalled vote. And I think that's the key to this election that every mainstream media pollster could do to correct for their Democrat oversample, and is openly telling us they're not, like Nate Cohn from the New York Times. They literally came out and said we're oversampling Democrats and we're not going to correct it. I can tell you right now, the Trump voter is not an elusive voter to Rasmussen reports. We get them. They talk to us, and we get way too many of them. The biggest national poll we just did had 51% Trump's 2020 supporters. Guess what? I weighted that to 45%. I have Biden 2020 voters weighted 49 to 45%. So I'm correcting for, I think, a lot of my blue, right lean, and I'm not correcting for any potential left lean. And this is Kamala Harris's probably high watermark. So I think it might just be downhill for her for here. And she is not. She's out. She's down 2 points today in our latest matchup. And it's, I mean, she hasn't won a single one of them yet at all, period.
I just watched the first clip released of her forthcoming interview with CNN's Dana Bash. And if people watch that, I would suspect if the polls would accurately reflect it at all, she would dive at the polls. It looks pretty bad. Raheem Kassam, our friend over the National Plus, said she's sleep deprived or she's drunk, and it did seem a little that way. But getting back to the polling, look, Fox News, you know how I feel about election fraud, and the narrative relies on conservatives. It really hinges on people who will question it, believing it. And so Fox News was instrumental in 2020. Remember, they called, Brett Baer called Arizona early in the night when like 2% of the vote was in or something, 3% of the vote. So Fox News saying that Kamala Harris is ahead is absolutely instrumental. And that's why I thought it was noteworthy that they're also pointing to North Carolina, because no one's been talking about North Carolina. And yesterday I had a conversation with a very active Republican in that state, John Kane, and we both feel that Democrats are making a play to steal North Carolina. And now you're seeing all these polls that suggested, like I mentioned at the top of the segment, the Cook Political Report, switching it from a toss-up to a leans Democrat. You now see this Fox poll where they just have Trump 1 point on Harris. Now, I know you all haven't specifically polled North Carolina based on the other polling you have done. What are your thoughts on now this focus on North Carolina by the Democrats and the Democrat pollsters?
I think any state that's a battleground state that's roughly tied and was to the left of a state in 2020, like those states that are more conservative than the battlegrounds, there's no way that they're in play at all. But I think everybody can back me up on this, and I don't spend every day poring over every other poll that's out there. But if you go to Real Clear Politics and look by state, I think you're going to be utterly horrified by how few actual state polls there have been. And the money is certainly not coming to us. It's not pouring into our bank account to go and survey these states. I don't see Trafalgar out there a lot. I don't see Rich Barris out there a lot. Harvard Harris, he's like MIA in all the states. So the people that are polling these states, it's like really small polls coming from colleges, or it's like New York Times Siena selectively dropping just the ones that seem to be cherry picked to fit the narrative. So I think unless it's one of the main battlegrounds, you look at a state and it's something that's bad for Trump, I think it's very reasonable to assume that it's part of the PSYOP.
Yeah, because it is very odd. I don't remember seeing this kind of focus on North Carolina in 2020. And now all of a sudden, like you said, people are putting money to put out these polls on North Carolina and what would seem to be, it's to the right of Georgia is how we typically see it, right? We would say it's a more red state than Georgia.
Well, if you just look at the top lines, Georgia was 5 points red in our latest poll for 2024. And according to the official results, right, it was roughly tied. But in my poll, I just said that I'm waiting 2020 vote to Biden +4. And right now, Harris is down 2. So that's a 6-point rightward shift just in my polling. Those are people that change their minds. They live somewhere. Some of those people live in every single state in America. So on the average, the states should be shifting right. Every single one of these states. And in our polling, the battleground states look way more competitive for Trump than they did in 2020 by process of, I mean, like, it's a simple conclusion, right? California probably moved left because conservatives fled and abandoned it, and Florida probably moved right, but like, who knows? I just, Virginia may be in play if my numbers are true, and you don't see me out there pulling Virginia. I don't have the money for it. They're pulling North Carolina. They're trying to rattle Trump supporters' cages.
Yeah, they definitely are. Like you said in your poll just out today, you do have Trump up 2 points, 48% to 46%. I wanted to also pull up a tweet by our friend and political operative Ryan Gordusky, who does not agree with me all the time on this. Most of the time, he doesn't agree with me on election fraud. But even he says something's wrong with the polling. And it seems like he agrees more with your polls. At Rasmussen, Ryan said, quote, Harris isn't winning seniors by 10 points. More polling errors because of bias in who answers the phones. Trump is probably tied nationally and up in most swing states. So even political operatives who don't always agree with me on, the election fraud, they say something's up with the polling. They're definitely doing something.
It's hard for me to look at, people could look at any one of my polls and maybe cherry pick some demographics that look a little bit like hot take. It's like, for instance, in the most recent one, I have Trump only winning men by 4 points, but he's tied among women. The thing is that I'm trying to wait to get the top line results correct. And sometimes the demographics just swing. The real question is, over time, how does that pollster perform? And over time, what do those demographics average out to? And I'd say that 18 to 39-year-olds roughly tied. Middle-aged voters go Trump by between 5 and 10 points. And the over 65s are kind of tied. They're the ones watching CNN and stuff right now.
Wow.
But like, let's all remember how Quinnipiac did in 2020 and say, well, they probably haven't really changed that much, and they were massively leaning left. And so there it is, right? They're showing the 65 and olders to left by maybe 10 points compared to my polls.
And real quick, I want to get to another interesting aspect of your poll when we look at the breakdowns and the crosstabs. You pointed out something very interesting to me, and this is religious affiliation or religious beliefs. This is literally a spiritual battle when you look at it this way. It was quite amazing at the people of faith, whether it be, Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, they by and large are voting, saying they're voting for Donald Trump. But if you're an atheist at 80%, or identify as some other thing, I don't know, Wiccan, I suppose.
Yeah. This is not something, Satanists. They're in there. There are, right? This is something that you're going to hear us talk about that isn't going to get a lot of mainstream billing, to be honest with you. People don't want to draw attention to the ideological subtext that drive the Trump versus Harris and Biden phenomenon, but we put these religious numbers in here, and it's a fact. And some of those samples, okay, fine. You can argue with me about the Jewish and Muslim vote. They were small samples, but the idea is that everybody who practices an organized religion votes for Trump, and everybody who's an atheist or something else votes by far for Harris. And you didn't even use the two-way numbers. The atheist numbers and the two-way were 83% to 9%. Harris has more support among atheists than she has among Democrats. And then we also asked, how often do people attend church? And Donald Trump was winning with every single human being in America, except for the people that say they rarely or never go to church. And I think humans are spiritual beings. I think that vacuum and that gap among the unreligious is being filled by a different religion. And I think that's why you see such division between Trump and Biden. It really is an ideological battle that transcends what you think about taxes or what you think about welfare or even COVID. It's much deeper than that.
It is a spiritual battle, and it just affirmed what I already believe that you had to be a truly godless person to support Kamala Harris. Thank you for confirming that for me. Mark Mitchell, I'm glad we have more time to chat today because there was some interesting aspects of the polling to talk about today. And everybody's talking about the polling this week. So I wanted to explain how it works. I'll share this segment specifically with some friends who have asked me this week. And you can always go and follow Mark and Rasmussen on YouTube, where he does these kind of breakdowns in video format for you, which is really helpful for us lay people. Thanks so much, Mark.